Hello everyone, welcome to the Private Audiobooks channel. Today's audiobook video is about how to stay untriggered in difficult times. Before we start the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you're ready, let's get started. Chapter 1. There is a moment that lives between what happens to you and what you do about it. Most people never notice this moment exists. They experience something, they react, and they believe these two things are inseparable, as if the world reaches into them and pulls their strings directly. But there is space there. Always. And in that space lives something that changes everything. Before we talk about not being triggered, we need to understand what being triggered actually means. Not the casual way people use the word, not the internet version where it means being offended or upset. The real thing. The thing that happens inside you when something in the external world meets something unresolved in your internal world, and suddenly you are no longer present. You are somewhere else, responding to something that may not even be happening right now. Being triggered is not about weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is a response pattern, one that every human being has in some form, wired into the same nervous system that keeps you alive. Your brain, in its endless vigilance, scans the environment for danger. It does this without asking your permission, without waiting for your conscious mind to weigh in. It sees a pattern, hears a tone, senses a shift, and in milliseconds it decides whether you are safe or under threat. This is not a choice. This is biology. And when your brain decides there is danger, it does what it has been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. It prepares you to fight, to run, or to freeze. The confusion comes from not understanding what your brain considers danger. You might think danger means a physical threat, something that could hurt your body. And yes, that is part of it. But your brain does not distinguish between physical threats and psychological ones. To your nervous system, rejection can feel like being chased by a predator. Criticism can register as an attack on your survival. A raised voice, a certain look, a specific phrase can light up the same alarm systems that would activate if you were standing at the edge of a cliff. Your body does not ask if the threat is reasonable. It just responds. This is what being triggered actually is. It is your nervous system reacting to a perceived threat, whether or not that threat is real, whether or not it is happening in this moment. And here is what matters most: the trigger is not the external event. The trigger is the internal response. The situation is just the situation. What makes it a trigger is what it activates inside you. Think about this carefully. Two people can experience the exact same moment and have completely different reactions. One person hears a critical comment and feels a brief sting, then moves on. Another person hears the same comment and is flooded with rage, shame, or terror. The comment did not do that. The comment is just words, just sound waves in the air. What happened is that those words connected to something already living inside the second person, something old, something unfinished. And suddenly they are not responding to the present moment. They are responding to every other time they felt criticized, rejected, unseen, every wound that has not fully healed. This is the architecture of being triggered. Your brain stores memories not just as facts but as full sensory experiences. A moment of pain is recorded with all its details: the feeling in your body, the tone of voice, the look on someone's face, even the smell in the room. These details become associated with danger. So later, when something in your current life resembles any part of that original experience, your brain flags it. It says, "This is familiar, this hurt before, prepare for pain." And your body responds before you even understand what is happening. This is why you can feel your heart racing before you know why. Why your throat tightens, why heat rises in your chest, why you suddenly want to lash out or shut down, and you might not even be able to articulate what just happened. The reaction comes first. The story you tell yourself about why comes second. Your conscious mind tries to make sense of what your nervous system has already decided. But here is what you need to hear, and hear clearly: this does not mean you are broken. This does not mean you are too sensitive or that you need to toughen up. This means you are human. Every person walking around carries their own collection of unresolved moments, their own catalog of what their brain has learned to treat as dangerous. Some people's triggers are obvious. Others are subtle. Some people know exactly where their reactions come from. Others have no idea. But everyone has them. The difference between people is not whether they have these patterns. The difference is what they do with them. And this is where most people get lost. They think the goal is to stop feeling triggered. They think they are supposed to reach a place where nothing bothers them, where they can remain calm no matter what happens. And when they fail at this, because of course they fail at this, they conclude there is something wrong with them. They try harder to suppress the feelings, to control the reactions, to white-knuckle their way through moments that light up their nervous system. And this attempt to force yourself not to feel, is not freedom. It is just another kind of prison. Not being triggered does not mean not feeling. It does not mean becoming numb or detached. It does not mean you stop caring or that nothing affects you. That version of calm is not calm. It is disconnection. It is the shutdown that happens when you override your own system so completely that you lose access to your genuine responses. That is not what we are building here. What we are building is something else entirely. We are building the capacity to feel what you feel without being controlled by it. To notice the heat rising without letting it dictate your actions. To recognize the old pattern activating without believing it is the truth of this moment. To stay present even when your body is screaming at you to react. This is not suppression. This is integration. This is you learning to be with yourself in a different way. The critical shift happens when you understand that the external world does not control you. It presents you with situations, yes. It offers challenges, provocations, difficulties. But it does not reach inside you and flip a switch. What happens inside you is yours. The sensations, the emotions, the impulses, they are your internal weather. And just like weather, they arise, they move through, and they pass. The mistake is thinking you are the storm. You are not the storm. You are the sky through which the storm moves. This distinction changes everything. When you believe the situation is making you feel a certain way, you are helpless. You can only try to control the external world, to avoid situations, to manipulate circumstances so you are never confronted with what activates you. This is exhausting and ultimately impossible. The world will not arrange itself around your triggers. But when you realize the reaction is happening inside you, not to you, you discover something profound. You discover you have agency. Not over the feeling itself, but over what you do with it. This is where the real work lies. Not in stopping the trigger from happening, because you cannot do that, not completely, not immediately. Your nervous system has years of conditioning. It has pathways carved deep by repetition, by survival, by every moment you needed to protect yourself. Those pathways do not disappear because you understand them now. But they can change. They can soften. They can become less automatic. And while that process unfolds, while you are still being triggered but learning not to be ruled by it, you learn to stay. Staying is the practice. When the heat comes, you stay. When the impulse rises, you stay. When every part of you wants to react, to defend, to strike back, to shut down, to run, you stay. You do not act on the first impulse. You do not obey the alarm. You notice it. You acknowledge it. You feel it in your body. And you stay present to this moment, to what is actually happening, not to the story your nervous system is telling you. This is not easy. Let me be clear about that. This is one of the hardest things a human being can learn to do. Because your survival instincts are powerful, and they do not care about your growth. They care about keeping you safe, even if their version of safe is to keep you small, reactive, defensive. So when you begin to stay instead of react, it feels wrong. It feels dangerous. Your body will protest. It will flood you with urgency. It will tell you that you must do something, now, or something terrible will happen. And you will have to learn, slowly, in moment after moment, that this is not true. Nothing terrible happens when you pause. Nothing falls apart when you do not immediately react. In fact, the opposite is true. The space you create by not reacting is where clarity lives. It is where you discover what you actually want to do, not what your nervous system is demanding you do. It is where you stop being a collection of automatic responses and start being a person making conscious choices. Think about the last time you were triggered. Really triggered, not just annoyed. Maybe someone said something that hit a nerve, or a situation unfolded that reminded you of something painful. In that moment, what did you feel first? Probably not a thought. Probably a sensation. Tightness, heat, a dropping feeling, a surge of energy. Your body knew before your mind did. And then, almost immediately, came the impulse. The need to respond, to fix, to fight, to flee. And if you are like most people, you acted on that impulse. You said something sharp, you withdrew, you defended yourself, you tried to control what was happening. And maybe it worked in the short term. Maybe you felt some relief. But later, when you looked back, did it feel like you? Or did it feel like something moved through you and you went along for the ride? This is the exhausting part of living triggered. You are always reacting. You are always responding to old pain dressed up as new situations. You are never quite here, never quite present, because part of you is always somewhere else, defending against ghosts. And you are tired. Tired of being so reactive. Tired of relationships that feel like battlegrounds. Tired of situations that should be manageable but somehow become overwhelming. Tired of feeling like you are not in control of yourself. But here is what you might not realize, that exhaustion is information. It is your system telling you something needs to change. Not the external world. You. The way you are relating to what happens. And this is where hope lives. Because if the problem is internal, then the solution is too. You do not need the world to be different. You need to be different with the world. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more yourself. The you that exists beneath the reactive patterns. The you that can be present, can be thoughtful, can be responsive instead of reactive. That version of you is not something you have to create. It is something you have to uncover. It has always been there, underneath the noise, underneath the urgency, underneath the endless cycle of trigger and reaction. And it is waiting for you to give it space to emerge. So we begin where all real change begins. Not with trying to fix yourself, not with judging yourself for being triggered, not with wishing you were different. We begin with seeing clearly. With understanding what is actually happening inside you when a trigger occurs. With recognizing that your nervous system is doing what it is designed to do, even if the danger it is protecting you from is not quite real. With noticing the space between stimulus and response, even if that space feels microscopic right now. Because once you see that space, once you know it is there, you can begin to widen it. And in that widening, in that small expansion of possibility, everything changes. This is not a journey toward becoming untouchable. It is a journey toward becoming present. Toward meeting life as it is, not as your wounds tell you it must be. Toward responding from the center of yourself, not from the edges where all the old hurts live. And it begins now, with this simple recognition: you are not controlled by what happens around you. You are experiencing patterns within you. And patterns can change. The question is not whether you will be triggered again. You will. The question is what you will do when it happens. Will you follow the old path, the one carved by repetition and pain? Or will you pause, just for a moment, and choose something different? Not because you should. Not because you are trying to be better. But because you are curious about what happens when you stay instead of react. When you feel instead of suppress. When you meet yourself, right in the middle of the activation, with compassion instead of judgment. This is the work. This is where freedom lives. Not in the absence of triggers, but in the presence of yourself, steady and aware, while the storm moves through. You are building a new relationship with your own nervous system. You are learning to be with what is, without needing it to be different. And that quiet capacity to stay, is the foundation of everything that comes next. Understanding this changes how you move through the world. You stop seeing every challenging moment as something that is happening to you, and you start seeing it as something that is revealing what is already inside you. A difficult conversation is no longer an attack. It is a mirror. A frustrating situation is no longer an injustice. It is information. Not because these things do not matter, not because your feelings are not valid, but because when you shift from victim to observer, you gain access to choice. And choice is where power lives. Your nervous system does not know the difference between a real threat and a perceived one. This is worth sitting with for a moment. When someone raises their voice, your body might respond the same way it would if you were facing actual physical danger. The heart rate increases. Adrenaline floods your system. Your thinking brain goes offline and your survival brain takes over. But there is no danger. Not really. No one is chasing you. No one is attacking you. And yet your body is fully prepared for battle or escape. This is the gap between reality and perception, and this gap is where most suffering lies. When you understand this, you stop taking your reactions at face value. You stop believing that because you feel afraid, there must be something to fear. Because you feel angry, someone must have wronged you. Because you feel hurt, someone must have intended harm. These equations feel true in the moment, but they are not always accurate. Sometimes what you are feeling is real, but it is not about now. It is about then. It is about every other time you felt this way, every other moment that taught you this is how the world works, this is what people do, this is what you must brace for. Your past does not stay in the past. It lives in your body, in your reactions, in the automatic patterns that activate before you have time to think. This is not something to feel ashamed about. This is just how human beings work. You are not broken because you carry old pain. You are not weak because certain things still affect you. You are simply alive, and part of being alive is that experiences leave marks. The question is not whether you have these marks. The question is whether you will let them define how you show up right now. There is a common misunderstanding that healing means arriving at a place where nothing bothers you anymore. People imagine a version of themselves that is completely unshakable, immune to difficulty, always calm no matter what happens. And they work toward this image, trying to eliminate every reaction, every vulnerability, every place where they can still be touched. But this is not healing. This is armor. And armor is heavy. It might protect you, but it also limits you. It keeps pain out, but it keeps everything else out too. Connection. Intimacy. Joy. The full experience of being human. Real healing is not about becoming invulnerable. It is about becoming resilient. It is about being able to feel things deeply without being destroyed by them. To be affected without being controlled. To care without needing to defend. This is a different kind of strength, one that does not rely on walls or distance. It relies on presence. On the capacity to be with what is happening, inside you and around you, without needing to fix it, fight it, or run from it. When you are triggered, your first instinct is to make the feeling go away. This makes sense. The feeling is uncomfortable, sometimes unbearable. Your body is screaming at you that something is wrong and you need to do something about it immediately. So you react. You lash out, you shut down, you defend yourself, you try to control the situation or the other person. And sometimes this provides temporary relief. The pressure lessens. The intensity fades. But it always comes back. Because you have not actually addressed what is happening. You have just pushed it away for a moment. The alternative is counterintuitive. Instead of trying to make the feeling go away, you turn toward it. You feel it. You let it be there. You notice where it lives in your body, what it wants you to do, what story it is telling you. And you do not obey it. You do not act on it. You just let it exist, let it move through you the way it needs to move. This is not passivity. This is one of the most active things you can do. Because everything in you is pulling toward reaction, and you are choosing something different. You are choosing to stay with yourself. This practice builds a kind of internal stability that nothing external can give you. When you can be with your own discomfort without needing to discharge it onto someone else or distract yourself from it, you are no longer at the mercy of your environment. You stop needing everything to go smoothly in order to feel okay. You stop needing people to behave a certain way in order to maintain your calm. You become the source of your own steadiness, and this changes everything. People often ask how long this takes. How many times do you have to stay with the discomfort before it stops being so intense? How long before the triggers lose their power? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on how deep the pattern goes, how long it has been there, how much reinforcement it has received over the years. Some patterns shift quickly. Others take time. But what you need to understand is that the timeline does not matter as much as you think it does. Because even while the pattern is still there, even while you are still being triggered, you are changing your relationship to it. And that change is felt immediately. The first time you notice a trigger activating and you do not react, something shifts. It might be small. The trigger might still be overwhelming. But you have proven to yourself that there is space between the feeling and the action. You have shown yourself that you are not your reactions. And this knowing, once it is in you, does not go away. It builds. Each time you stay, each time you choose presence over reaction, you are reinforcing a new pathway. You are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to feel without acting. That you can handle what arises. That you are not in danger just because your body thinks you are. This is why the work is not about perfection. You will be triggered again. You will react in ways you wish you had not. You will lose your center and say things you regret and fall into old patterns you thought you had moved beyond. This is part of the process. The difference is that now you know what is happening. Now you can recognize it. And recognizing it is the first step to choosing differently next time. There is no finish line here. There is only the ongoing practice of meeting yourself, again and again, with a little more awareness and a little more compassion each time. So the question is not whether you are triggered. The question is, what do you do in the seconds after you notice the activation? Do you follow the familiar path, the one that has been worn smooth by repetition? Or do you pause, just for a breath, and feel what it is like to stay? To not know what comes next, but to trust that you can handle it? This moment, this tiny pause, is where everything changes. It is where you stop being controlled by your conditioning and start being present to your life. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, and in every moment that follows. The door is always open. You just have to choose to walk through it. Chapter 2. There is a version of yourself that exists only when things are easy. This version is calm, thoughtful, present. It knows how to respond instead of react. It can see clearly, think rationally, hold space for complexity. This is the self you recognize, the one you think of as your true nature. And then something happens. Pressure arrives. Stakes rise. Time compresses. And suddenly, that version of you is nowhere to be found. In its place is something else entirely. Something reactive, defensive, rigid. Something that does what needs to be done to survive the moment, even if that means abandoning everything you thought you valued about how you show up in the world. This is the real test. Not how you are when life is smooth, when you have slept well and nothing urgent is demanding your attention. The real test is who you become when the ground shifts beneath you. When the pressure is on and the stakes are high and every part of your system is screaming that you need to do something, fix something, control something, right now. This is when you discover what is actually running the show. And for most people, what they discover is that they are not in control at all. Something older, something faster, something that does not care about their values or their intentions has taken over. And by the time they realize what has happened, the damage is already done. Your brain is not designed for nuance under pressure. It is designed for survival. And survival does not require you to be thoughtful or fair or compassionate. It requires you to be fast. So when your nervous system perceives threat, it does not consult with your higher reasoning. It does not ask what kind of person you want to be or how you hope to handle this situation. It bypasses all of that and goes straight to the automatic responses that have kept humans alive for millennia. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. These are not choices. These are programs that run without your permission, activated by a part of your brain that is always scanning for danger and always ready to act. Under pressure, your thinking brain goes offline. This is not metaphorical. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, planning, impulse control, emotional regulation, it literally becomes less active when you are stressed. Blood flow redirects to the parts of your brain that handle immediate action. Your field of vision narrows. Your ability to consider multiple perspectives collapses. Your capacity for empathy diminishes. You become a simplified version of yourself, optimized for one thing: getting through this moment. And you will do whatever that takes. This is why people do things under pressure that they would never do otherwise. Why they say things they do not mean, make decisions they later regret, act in ways that contradict everything they believe about themselves. It is not that they are weak or dishonest or fundamentally flawed. It is that they are human. And humans under threat revert to their most basic programming. The question is not whether this will happen to you. It already has, and it will again. The question is whether you will begin to recognize what is happening while it is happening, and whether you will build the capacity to stay present even when every part of you wants to collapse into automatic reaction. Most people do not even realize how much of their behavior is automatic. They believe they are making conscious choices, but they are not. They are following patterns laid down years ago, sometimes decades ago, patterns that were adaptive once but may no longer serve them. A child who learned that the only way to get attention was to be perfect might become an adult who cannot tolerate mistakes, not in themselves and not in others. A child who learned that expressing needs led to rejection might become an adult who shuts down and withdraws the moment conflict arises. A child who learned that the world is fundamentally unsafe might become an adult who tries to control everything and everyone around them. These patterns are not personality. They are survival strategies. And under pressure, they activate automatically. You do not choose to become controlling when you are stressed. You do not decide to shut down or lash out or become rigid. It just happens. One moment you are fine, or you think you are fine, and the next moment you are in the grip of something that feels bigger than you. And if you have never examined this, if you have never looked closely at what happens inside you when pressure arrives, you will believe that this is just who you are. That this is your nature under stress, and there is nothing you can do about it except try to avoid stressful situations. But avoidance is not a strategy. It is a prison. Because life will continue to present you with difficulty, and if your only tool is avoidance, you will spend your entire life running from anything that might activate your automatic responses. The feeling of losing control is one of the most destabilizing experiences a human being can have. It strikes at the core of your sense of self. You are supposed to be in charge of yourself, of your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. And then suddenly you are not. You feel yourself saying things you did not plan to say, doing things you did not decide to do, reacting in ways that some part of you knows are not helpful but cannot seem to stop. And underneath all of it is this terrifying sense that you are not the one driving. That something else has taken over, and you are just along for the ride, watching yourself act in ways you do not recognize or respect. This loss of control is not random. It has roots. It comes from moments in your past when you were genuinely powerless, when things happened to you that you could not stop or change or escape. Your nervous system recorded those moments. It learned that the world is not safe, that you cannot trust things to work out, that at any moment everything could fall apart. And so it stays vigilant. It watches for signs that the past is repeating. And when it sees those signs, even if they are faint, even if they are not quite accurate, it takes over. It says, I remember this, I know what happens next, and I am not letting it happen again. But here is the problem. Your nervous system is trying to protect you from something that already happened. It is fighting a battle that is already over. And in doing so, it often creates the very outcomes it is trying to prevent. You are afraid of being abandoned, so you become clingy or demanding, and you push people away. You are afraid of being controlled, so you become rigid and defensive, and you lose connection. You are afraid of being hurt, so you shut down before anyone can get close, and you ensure your own isolation. The protective response becomes the problem. And because it is automatic, because it happens faster than thought, you do not see it happening. You just feel the consequences. The cost of this is higher than most people realize. It is not just that you react in ways you later regret. It is that you are not present for your own life. You are living in a constant state of bracing, of anticipating the next threat, of trying to manage and control outcomes so you never have to feel that loss of control again. And this takes everything. Your energy, your attention, your capacity for joy. You cannot be fully present when part of you is always scanning for danger. You cannot connect deeply when you are always prepared to defend or flee. You cannot rest when your system believes that letting your guard down means something terrible will happen. This is the hidden cost of living in automatic reaction. It is not just the moments where you lose control. It is the constant background hum of anxiety that comes from never feeling truly safe. It is the exhaustion of always having to manage your environment, your relationships, your own emotional state. It is the isolation that comes from keeping people at a distance because closeness feels too risky. It is the sense that life is happening to you, that you are always responding to what comes, never quite able to choose how you want to be. And here is what makes this even harder. Most of the time, you do not realize you are doing it. You think you are just being realistic, just protecting yourself, just doing what needs to be done. You have explanations for all of it. You are not controlling, you are just organized. You are not shut down, you are just independent. You are not overreacting, the situation really is that serious. You tell yourself these stories, and they feel true, because from inside your own nervous system, from inside your own activation, everything you are doing makes perfect sense. It is only later, when you have some distance, that you can see how much of your response was about the past, not the present. How much was automatic, not chosen. This is why awareness is the first step, and why it is also the hardest step. You have to be willing to see yourself clearly, to look at your patterns without judgment but also without excuses. You have to be willing to admit that you are not always in control, that you react in ways you do not like, that pressure reveals something in you that you would rather not acknowledge. This is uncomfortable. It is much easier to believe that your reactions are justified, that if people would just behave differently or situations would just stop being so difficult, you would be fine. But this keeps you stuck. Because as long as you are waiting for the external world to change, you are not taking responsibility for your internal world. And your internal world is the only thing you actually have control over. Let me be clear about what control actually means here. It does not mean you control what you feel. You do not. Feelings arise on their own, generated by your nervous system in response to what it perceives. You do not decide to feel afraid or angry or hurt. Those feelings come, whether you want them to or not. Trying to control your feelings is like trying to control the weather. It is a losing battle, and it makes you miserable. But what you can control, what you can learn to influence, is what you do with those feelings. Whether you let them dictate your actions, or whether you feel them and choose your response anyway. This is a crucial distinction, and it is where most people get confused. They think that if they still feel triggered, if they still feel the surge of anger or the wave of fear, then nothing has changed. But everything has changed if you can feel those things without immediately acting on them. If you can notice the impulse to lash out and not lash out. Notice the urge to shut down and stay present anyway. Notice the need to control and let it be without trying to manage every detail. This is not suppression. Suppression is pushing the feeling away, pretending it is not there, forcing yourself to appear calm while everything inside you is churning. What we are talking about is something different. It is feeling the full force of the emotion and choosing not to be ruled by it. Your automatic responses are fast, but they are not inevitable. There is a moment, a tiny sliver of space, between the trigger and the reaction. In that moment, you have a choice. Not a comfortable choice, not an easy choice, but a choice nonetheless. You can follow the automatic path, the one your nervous system has prepared for you, the one that promises relief through reaction. Or you can pause. You can feel what is happening in your body, notice the story your mind is telling, and wait. Just wait. Not because you are trying to be good, not because you are suppressing anything, but because you are curious about what happens if you do not immediately discharge the feeling. This pause is the most powerful tool you have. It is where everything shifts. Because in that pause, your thinking brain has a chance to come back online. The intensity of the feeling begins to crest. You start to see that you are not actually in danger, that this moment is not that moment, that you have options you could not see when you were in the grip of the reaction. And from this place, you can choose. Not perfectly, not without effort, but you can choose. And every time you make that choice, you are rewiring your brain. You are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to pause, safe to feel, safe to not react immediately. You are building a new pathway, one that eventually becomes as automatic as the old one, but far more useful. The difficult truth is that you cannot avoid pressure. Life will continue to present challenges. Deadlines, conflicts, disappointments, losses, unexpected changes. These are not aberrations. They are part of being alive. And if your strategy is to avoid them or to white-knuckle your way through them, you will be exhausted and you will still be reactive. The only way through is to change your relationship with pressure itself. To stop seeing it as something that should not be happening and start seeing it as the very thing that reveals where you still have work to do. Every time you are triggered, every time you feel that loss of control, you are being shown something. Not something wrong with you, but something still unresolved. A place where your past is intruding on your present. A pattern that is asking to be seen, to be understood, to be integrated. And if you can meet these moments with curiosity instead of shame, if you can look at them as information rather than failure, they become opportunities. Opportunities to know yourself more deeply, to heal what is still hurting, to build the capacity to stay present even when it is hard. This is not about becoming someone who never feels pressure. It is about becoming someone who can be with pressure without fragmenting. Who can feel the intensity without losing their center. Who can recognize their automatic responses and choose something different, not because they should, but because they have learned that the automatic response does not actually give them what they want. It might give them temporary relief, but it does not give them connection, or peace, or the sense that they are living according to their own values. And eventually, that matters more than the relief. So the work is to notice. To catch yourself in the act of going automatic. To feel the moment when your thinking brain goes offline and your survival brain takes over. And in that moment, to pause. To breathe. To feel whatever is happening in your body without needing to fix it or act on it. To stay with yourself, even when staying feels impossible. This is how you build resilience. This is how you stop being at the mercy of your automatic responses. Not by eliminating them, but by learning to be present to them, to hold them without being consumed by them. And here is what you will discover if you stay with this practice. The feelings that seem unbearable become bearable. The reactions that feel inevitable become optional. The sense that you are powerless begins to shift into something else. Not control, not in the way you thought you wanted it, but agency. The quiet knowledge that you can be with whatever arises, that you do not need to be protected from your own experience, that you are capable of staying present even when it is difficult. And this steady presence, is worth more than any amount of trying to control the external world. Because it goes with you everywhere. It is yours, and no one can take it away. Think about what happens to your relationships when you are living in constant reaction. When pressure arrives and you go automatic, the people around you feel it. They feel the shift in your energy, the way you become less available, less present, more defended. They may not understand what is happening, but they sense that something has changed. And they respond to that change, often in ways that trigger you further. You feel attacked, so you defend. They feel your defense as distance or hostility, so they push harder or pull away. And suddenly you are in a cycle, each person's automatic response feeding the others, and no one can remember how it started or how to stop it. This is how relationships deteriorate. Not usually through one big rupture, but through 1,000 small moments where both people were triggered and neither could stay present. Where both people reacted from their wounds instead of responding from their center. Where the pressure of the moment overwhelmed their capacity to see each other clearly, and they fell back into their oldest patterns. He withdraws because he learned that his feelings were too much. She pursues because she learned that distance means abandonment. And neither of them is actually responding to the other. They are responding to ghosts, to old stories, to fears that may have nothing to do with this relationship at all. When you begin to catch your automatic responses, when you start to pause instead of react, something shifts in your relationships too. Not because the other person changes, but because you stop feeding the cycle. You feel the urge to defend, and you do not defend. You notice the impulse to withdraw, and you stay. You recognize the familiar spiral starting, and instead of getting pulled in, you breathe. You feel what is happening inside you without making the other person responsible for fixing it. And this, the simple act of staying present to your own experience, creates space. Space for the other person to do the same. Space for something new to emerge between you. But you cannot do this if you are in the grip of your automatic responses. You cannot create space when you are in survival mode. And this is why the work matters so much. Not just for you, but for everyone in your life. Every time you pause instead of react, every time you stay present instead of going automatic, you are creating the possibility for connection. Real connection, not the defensive dance that so many relationships become. You are showing up as someone who can be with difficulty without fragmenting, and that steadiness is felt. It changes the field. It invites others into presence too. The same is true for your work, for your creative endeavors, for anything that matters to you. Pressure will come. Deadlines, setbacks, criticism, failure. And when it does, your automatic responses will try to take over. You will want to give up, to play it safe, to protect yourself from further disappointment. Or you will push harder, drive yourself into exhaustion, sacrifice everything else in pursuit of success. These are both automatic responses, both patterns that served you once but may be limiting you now. And neither of them allows you to show up fully, to bring your best thinking, your deepest creativity, your most authentic expression to what you are doing. When you can be with pressure without going automatic, you gain access to a different quality of engagement. You can see the situation more clearly because you are not looking through the filter of your fear or your need to control. You can respond more creatively because your thinking brain is online, not shut down by stress. You can take risks because you are not operating from a place of desperate self-protection. You can fail and learn from it because you are not collapsing into shame or defensiveness. This is what becomes possible when you are not ruled by your automatic responses. Not perfection, not immunity to difficulty, but a different relationship with it. One where you stay yourself, even when it is hard. And slowly, through practice, through catching yourself again and again, through feeling the automatic response without acting on it, something changes. The responses themselves begin to soften. They do not disappear, but they lose some of their intensity. The gap between trigger and reaction widens. What used to send you into immediate reactivity now gives you a moment to breathe. What used to feel unbearable becomes manageable. Not because you have hardened yourself, not because you have built walls, but because you have learned to be with yourself differently. You have learned that you can feel the full force of your emotions without being destroyed by them. And this knowing, once it settles into your body, changes everything. You begin to trust yourself in a new way. Not trust that you will never be triggered, but trust that you can handle being triggered. That you will not lose yourself completely, that you will not do irreparable damage, that you will find your way back to center even if it takes time. This trust is not built through success. It is built through failure, through all the times you did go automatic, and then you came back. You apologized, you repaired, you learned something. And you kept going. This is what resilience actually is. Not never falling, but always getting back up. Not never being triggered, but not letting the trigger define you. So when difficult times come, and they will come, you have a choice. You can let the pressure push you into your automatic responses, into the patterns that have run your life for years, into the reactions that promise relief but deliver only more suffering. Or you can pause. You can feel what is happening inside you. You can notice the old familiar pull toward reaction, toward control, toward collapse. And you can stay. Not because you are strong, not because you are better than anyone else, but because you have practiced. Because you have learned, in moment after moment, that staying is possible. That you can be with what is, even when what is feels impossible. This is the real test of difficult times. Not whether they knock you down, but whether you can stay present while they do. Whether you can feel the full weight of the moment without losing yourself in it. Whether you can be afraid and stay anyway. Be angry and not lash out. Be hurt and not shut down. This is the practice. This is the work. And it is available to you right now, in this moment, and in every moment of pressure that follows. The only question is whether you will choose it. Chapter 3, Response, not Reaction. There's a moment that exists between what happens to you and what you do about it. Most people never notice it. It passes in less than a second, sometimes in a fraction of that. But in that moment lives your entire emotional life, your sense of control, and the difference between feeling like you're navigating your days or being tossed around by them. This moment is where emotional regulation lives. Not in the absence of feeling, but in the space between feeling and action. You've probably heard the term before. Emotional regulation. It sounds clinical, like something that belongs in a textbook or a therapy office. But strip away the formal language and what you're really talking about is this: the ability to feel what you feel without letting those feelings decide what you do. It's the difference between anger that moves through you and anger that moves you. Between anxiety that signals something and anxiety that controls everything. And here's what matters most: it's not something you either have or don't have. It's not a personality trait you were born with or without. It's a skill. Like learning to swim or learning to drive. At first, it feels impossible. Your body doesn't know what to do. Everything feels clumsy and forced. But with practice, it becomes part of how you move through the world. Not because you're fighting against yourself, but because you've learned a different way to be. Let's start with what emotional regulation is not. It's not suppression. It's not pretending you don't feel what you feel. It's not putting on a calm face while your insides are screaming. That's not regulation. That's a lid on a boiling pot, and eventually, something's going to blow. There's a crucial distinction here that often gets lost. When people hear about not reacting emotionally, they sometimes think it means not feeling emotionally. They think the goal is to become stone-faced, unshakable, unmoved by anything. That's not strength. That's numbness. And numbness isn't the same as calm. Real emotional regulation means you feel everything. The anger when someone dismisses you. The fear when something important is at stake. The hurt when someone you care about is careless with your heart. You feel all of it. But you don't let those feelings hijack your nervous system and make decisions for you. You feel them, you acknowledge them, and then you decide what to do. That last part is where the power lives. In the deciding. Think about the last time someone said something that really got under your skin. Maybe it was a criticism that felt unfair. Maybe it was a comment that touched on something you're already insecure about. In that moment, you probably felt a surge. Heat rising in your chest. Your heart rate picking up. Maybe your jaw tightened. Your mind started racing with responses, defenses, counterattacks. That's not wrong. That's your system doing exactly what it's designed to do. It detected a threat, and it prepared you to deal with it. But here's the question: in that moment, who was in control? Was it you, the person who has goals and values and a larger context for your life? Or was it the surge, the heat, the racing thoughts? Because if it was the surge, then you weren't regulating. You were reacting. And reactions don't care about your long-term well-being. They care about right now. They care about making the discomfort stop as quickly as possible. Emotional regulation is what happens when you feel that surge and you don't immediately act on it. You notice it. You name it if you can. Anger. Fear. Shame. Whatever it is. And then, instead of letting it pull you into a reaction, you pause. Not forever. Not dramatically. Just long enough to let your thinking brain come back online. Long enough to remember that you have choices. This is not about being passive. It's not about letting people walk all over you while you sit there breathing deeply and pretending everything's fine. It's about choosing your response instead of defaulting to a reaction. Sometimes, the right response is firm. Sometimes it's loud. Sometimes it involves confrontation. But it comes from you, not from the surge. And that makes all the difference. Now, let's talk about why this matters. Because you might be thinking, what's the big deal? So what if I react sometimes? Everyone does. And you're right. Everyone does. But there's a cost to living in constant reaction mode, and it's higher than most people realize. When you're always reacting, you're always behind. You're always responding to what just happened instead of moving toward what you want to happen. Your energy goes into putting out fires instead of building anything. And over time, that wears you down. You start to feel like life is something that happens to you, not something you participate in. You feel tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Because it's not your body that's tired. It's your nervous system. It's been stuck in high alert for so long that it doesn't remember what baseline feels like. There's also the relational cost. When you can't regulate, your relationships suffer. Not because you're a bad person, but because people can't predict you. They don't know which version of you they're going to get. They start walking on eggshells, or they stop sharing things with you because they're not sure how you'll react. And slowly, without anyone really deciding it should happen, distance grows. Not because anyone stopped caring, but because it felt safer than staying close to the volatility. But beyond all of that, there's something deeper. When you can't regulate your emotions, you lose trust in yourself. Because on some level, you know you're not fully in control. You know that the right trigger at the right time could send you spinning. And that knowing, even if it's not conscious, creates a background hum of anxiety. You start avoiding situations where you might get triggered. You start managing your life around your emotional reactivity instead of around your actual values and goals. And that's a very small way to live. So what does it mean to regulate? Let's get specific. Because theory is one thing, but application is everything. Emotional regulation starts with awareness. You can't regulate what you don't notice. And most people don't notice their emotions until they're already in the middle of them. The anger is already loud. The anxiety is already gripping. The shame is already overwhelming. By that point, regulation is much harder. Not impossible, but harder. The skill is in catching emotions earlier. In noticing the first whisper before it becomes a shout. This means paying attention to your body. Because your body knows you're angry before your mind does. It knows you're anxious before you've consciously named it. There are signals. Tension in your shoulders. Shallowness in your breath. A tightness in your throat. A flutter in your stomach. These aren't random. They're information. And if you learn to read them, you get an early warning system. Let's say you're in a meeting and someone takes credit for your idea. You might not immediately think, I'm angry. But your body knows. Your jaw might clench. Your hands might form fists under the table. Your breath might get shorter. If you're paying attention, you catch those signals. And catching them early gives you options. This is where most people make a mistake. They notice they're angry and they immediately try to make the anger go away. They tell themselves they shouldn't feel that way. They try to rationalize it away. They take deep breaths and think positive thoughts and basically try to suppress the emotion until it's quiet. But that's not regulation. That's suppression with extra steps. Real regulation doesn't try to eliminate the emotion. It acknowledges it. Yes, I'm angry. That makes sense. Someone just took credit for my work. Of course I'm angry. That's a completely reasonable response. And just that acknowledgement, just that validation of your own experience, takes some of the edge off. Because a lot of the intensity in emotions comes from fighting them. When you stop fighting, they don't have to yell so loud to be heard. Once you've acknowledged what you're feeling, the next step is to get curious about it. Not in a detached, clinical way, but in a genuinely interested way. What is this anger trying to tell me? What does it want? Usually, emotions want something very simple. Anger often wants fairness or respect. Fear wants safety. Shame wants acceptance. When you understand what the emotion wants, you can start thinking about how to address that need in a way that actually serves you. In the meeting example, your anger wants recognition. It wants the record set straight. That's useful information. But it doesn't tell you how to act. You could interrupt the person and call them out in front of everyone. That might feel satisfying in the moment, but it might also make you look petty or defensive. Or you could wait until after the meeting and address it privately. Or you could let it go this time but make sure to document your contributions more clearly going forward. All of those are options. And the fact that you're considering options means you're regulating. You're not just reacting to the anger. You're using it as information and then choosing your path. This is what people miss about calmness. They think calm means not feeling. But calm doesn't mean your waters are still. It means you're not being tossed around by the waves. You can feel anger and be calm. You can feel fear and be calm. Because calmness isn't about the absence of emotion. It's about the presence of choice. Now, let's address something important. Learning to regulate doesn't mean you'll never react again. You will. Everyone does. There will be moments when something catches you off guard and you're in the middle of a reaction before you even knew it started. That's human. That's normal. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is increasing the percentage of time you're responding instead of reacting. If right now you react 80% of the time and respond 20% of the time, maybe in 6 months those numbers shift. Maybe it becomes 60 to 40. Then 50 to 50. Progress isn't linear, and it's not dramatic. It's gradual. But gradual change, sustained over time, transforms everything. There's also this: learning to regulate your emotions changes how you experience them. When you're constantly fighting your feelings or being overwhelmed by them, emotions feel like enemies. They feel dangerous. Something to be avoided or controlled. But when you learn to work with them, when you learn that you can feel something intensely and not be destroyed by it, emotions become less threatening. They become information. They become part of your guidance system rather than something you're at war with. Think about physical pain for a moment. If you touch a hot stove, your hand jerks back automatically. You don't think about it. That's a reflex, and it's protective. But imagine if every time you felt any physical sensation, pleasant or unpleasant, you had that same jerking away reflex. You'd be constantly tensing against your own body. You'd never relax. You'd be exhausted. That's what it's like when you can't regulate emotions. Every feeling, even mild ones, triggers that same jerking away response. That same need to make it stop immediately. And it's exhausting. Emotional regulation is like building tolerance. Not tolerance in the sense of putting up with harm, but tolerance in the sense of capacity. The ability to feel something uncomfortable without immediately needing it to change. This doesn't mean you sit in misery. It means you stop treating discomfort like an emergency. Because when discomfort is always an emergency, you're always in crisis mode. And crisis mode is no way to live. Let's talk about the mechanics for a moment. What actually happens in your brain when you regulate versus when you react? When something triggering happens, your amygdala, the part of your brain that handles threat detection, lights up. It sends signals throughout your body. Adrenaline gets released. Your heart rate increases. Blood flow shifts away from your thinking brain and toward your muscles because your system thinks you might need to fight or run. This all happens in milliseconds. It's automatic. This is the reaction. Regulation happens when your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles planning and decision-making, comes back online. But here's the thing, that doesn't happen automatically when you're activated. You have to create space for it. That pause we talked about earlier? That's not poetic language. That's literal neuroscience. When you pause, even for a few seconds, you're giving your prefrontal cortex time to catch up to your amygdala. You're letting your thinking brain have a say in what happens next instead of letting your threat detection system run the whole show. And this is trainable. The more you practice pausing, the shorter the pause needs to be. The more you practice noticing your emotions early, the easier it becomes to catch them before they escalate. Your brain builds pathways for regulation the same way it builds pathways for anything else you practice. At first, it's effortful. It takes conscious attention. But over time, it becomes more automatic. Not in the sense that you stop choosing, but in the sense that choosing becomes easier. There are practical tools that support this process. Breathing is one of them, though it's become so cliched that people sometimes roll their eyes at it. But there's a reason it's recommended so often. Slow, deep breathing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest response. It's literally a signal to your body that you're safe. That you're not being chased by a predator. That it's okay to come out of high alert. This doesn't make the emotion disappear, but it does take the intensity down a notch. And sometimes, a notch is all you need to be able to think clearly again. Another tool is naming. When you can name what you're feeling with specificity, it activates your prefrontal cortex. There's actually research on this. When people look at an image of an angry face, their amygdala lights up. But when they label the emotion, when they think or say the word angry, the prefrontal cortex activates and the amygdala activity decreases. It's like naming the emotion gives your brain something to do other than just react to it. So instead of just feeling a surge of overwhelming feeling, you think or say, this is anger, or this is anxiety, or this is disappointment. That simple act of naming creates a tiny bit of distance. Not distance in the sense of disconnection, but distance in the sense of perspective. You're not the emotion. You're the person experiencing the emotion. And that distinction matters. Movement is another tool. When your body is flooded with activation energy, sometimes the most effective thing you can do is move. Not in a frantic way, but in a deliberate way. Go for a walk. Do some stretching. Even just standing up and shaking out your limbs can help discharge some of that energy. Because that activation your body created? It was meant to fuel action. If you don't give it an outlet, it just sits in your system, keeping you wound up. But here's what all of these tools have in common: they're not about making the feeling go away. They're about creating space around the feeling so you can choose what to do with it. And that's the heart of regulation. Not control in the sense of domination, but control in the sense of agency. You're not controlling the weather. You're deciding how you're going to navigate it. Now, let's talk about what makes regulation harder. Because it's not equally difficult all the time. There are conditions that make it significantly more challenging to regulate your emotions, and knowing what those conditions are helps you prepare for them. The first is chronic stress. When you're under ongoing stress, your nervous system is already running hot. Your baseline is elevated. So it takes less to push you over the edge into reactivity. If you're dealing with financial pressure, relationship conflict, work demands, health issues, or any combination of these, your capacity for regulation is diminished. Not because you're weak, but because your system is already taxed. It's like trying to stay balanced while carrying a heavy load. It's possible, but it requires more effort and more attention. Sleep deprivation is another major factor. When you don't get enough sleep, your prefrontal cortex doesn't function as well. Your thinking brain is foggy. Meanwhile, your amygdala becomes more reactive. Studies show that sleep-deprived people have a harder time reading emotions accurately and a harder time regulating their own emotions. Everything feels more intense. Everything feels more urgent. This is why small things can feel catastrophic when you're exhausted. It's not that you're being dramatic. It's that your capacity for perspective is genuinely impaired. Hunger works similarly. When your blood sugar is low, your body perceives that as a stressor. And when your body is stressed, regulation becomes harder. There's a reason hangry is a recognized phenomenon. It's not cute or funny when it's happening to you. It's real. Your body doesn't have the resources it needs, and that makes everything harder, including managing your emotional responses. Physical pain is another factor. Chronic pain or even acute pain requires a lot of energy and attention from your nervous system. It's a constant signal that something's wrong. That uses up resources that would otherwise be available for regulation. This doesn't mean people in pain can't regulate. Many do, remarkably well. But it does mean they're working harder to do it, and that deserves recognition. Then there's emotional pain. If you're going through a breakup, grieving a loss, dealing with rejection or failure, your emotional bandwidth is already being used. You have less available for day-to-day regulation. This is why people sometimes say they're not themselves during difficult times. They're more irritable, more sensitive, more reactive. That's not a character flaw. That's a capacity issue. And understanding it as such helps you be more compassionate with yourself during those periods. All of this points to something important: self-regulation isn't just about in-the-moment techniques. It's also about how you live your life. How much sleep you get. How you nourish your body. How you manage stress. Whether you have supportive relationships. Whether you have practices that help you process what you're carrying. These aren't separate from emotional regulation. They're the foundation of it. You can't regulate your way out of burnout. You can't breathe your way through chronic sleep deprivation. You can't positive think your way past ongoing harm. At some point, the answer isn't better coping skills. It's changing the conditions. And that's a different kind of work. But it's necessary work if you want regulation to be sustainable rather than just another thing you have to try hard at. Let's talk about what happens when you start to get better at this. When regulation becomes more familiar. When you start catching your emotions earlier and choosing your responses more often. What changes? First, you notice that you have more energy. Because you're not spending it all on emotional firefighting. You're not constantly recovering from reactions you wish you hadn't had. You're not lying awake at night replaying conversations and wishing you'd said something different. That energy becomes available for other things. For creativity. For connection. For actual problem solving rather than just damage control. Second, your relationships improve. Not because you've become more pleasant or easier to deal with, though you might have. But because people feel safer with you. They know that if something comes up, you'll be able to handle it. They know they can bring you difficult things and you won't fall apart or explode. That creates trust. And trust creates depth. The relationships in your life can go deeper because they're not spending all their energy managing your reactivity. Third, you start to trust yourself more. You know that you can handle what comes up. Not because nothing difficult will happen, but because you've proven to yourself that you can feel difficult things without being destroyed by them. You've seen yourself pause when you wanted to lash out. You've seen yourself stay present when you wanted to run. And each time you do that, you build evidence. Evidence that you're capable. Evidence that you're resilient. Not in the toxic, push through everything way, but in the real, sustainable way. The way that acknowledges difficulty and chooses to engage with it rather than be consumed by it. Fourth, you become more creative in how you solve problems. Because when you're not in reactive mode, you can see more options. Reactivity narrows your field of vision. It makes everything look like a threat or a disaster. But when you're regulated, even in the middle of something difficult, you can see nuance. You can see possibilities. You can think strategically instead of just defensively. This applies to conflicts, to challenges at work, to parenting, to creative projects. Everything benefits from the expanded perspective that regulation provides. And finally, you become someone who can hold space for others. Because you're not so overwhelmed by your own emotions that you can't handle anyone else's. You can sit with someone who's struggling without needing to fix them or make them feel better immediately. You can listen without getting defensive. You can be present without getting pulled into the chaos. And that's a gift. Both to them and to you. This doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you read about it or understand it intellectually. It happens through practice. Through catching yourself mid-reaction and choosing differently. Through noticing your patterns and slowly, gradually, shifting them. Through being patient with yourself when you mess up and choosing to try again rather than giving up. There will be setbacks. There will be days when you react in all the old ways. When you say the thing you know you shouldn't say. When you let the anger take over or the anxiety spiral. When that happens, and it will, the practice is in how you handle the aftermath. Do you collapse into shame and self-criticism? Do you tell yourself you'll never change? Or do you look at what happened with curiosity and compassion? Do you ask yourself what was happening in that moment that made regulation so hard? Do you think about what you could do differently next time? That's the practice. Not perfection, but learning. Not control, but growth. Here's what you're building toward. Not a life without emotion. Not a life where nothing bothers you. But a life where you feel everything and none of it owns you. Where you can be angry without being cruel. Where you can be afraid without being paralyzed. Where you can be sad without being consumed. Where your emotions are part of your experience but not the entirety of it. Where you're the one holding the steering wheel even when the road is rough. This is the promise of emotional regulation. Not that life becomes easy, but that you become capable. Not that you stop feeling, but that you start choosing. Not that you're never triggered, but that being triggered doesn't mean being out of control. You feel the surge. You notice it. You acknowledge it. And then you decide. That moment of deciding, that's where your freedom lives. That's where your power is. Not in controlling what happens to you, but in choosing how you meet it. And slowly, over time, with practice and patience, that choice becomes more available. More familiar. More automatic. Until one day you realize that the thing that used to send you spinning barely registers. Not because you've become cold or disconnected, but because you've become skilled. Because you've learned to be with your emotions instead of against them. Because you've learned that you can trust yourself to handle what comes. And that changes everything. Chapter 4. There is a moment that exists between what happens to you and what you do about it. Most people never notice this moment. It passes so quickly, so quietly, that it feels like nothing at all. But this moment is where everything changes. This is the space where you either react from old patterns or respond from a place of clarity. This is where you discover whether the external world controls you or whether you hold the reins of your own inner state. When we talk about being triggered, we are really talking about a loss of center. Something outside of you pulls a string inside of you, and suddenly you are no longer here. You are somewhere else, caught in a cascade of thoughts, emotions, and impulses that seem to have a life of their own. Your heart races. Your thoughts spiral. Your body tenses. And in that state, you act. You speak. You decide. But none of it comes from the part of you that is awake. It comes from the part of you that is reacting, that is defending, that is trying to survive something that may not even be real. The work we are about to explore is not about suppressing what you feel. It is not about becoming a stone, cold and unresponsive. It is not about pretending that certain situations do not affect you. That would be denial, and denial is just another form of reactivity. What we are after is something far more subtle and far more powerful. We are after the ability to feel everything and still remain rooted in yourself. We are after the capacity to experience the pull without being pulled. To notice the trigger without being overtaken by it. This is not easy work. It goes against the grain of how most people live. We are conditioned to believe that if something bothers us, we must act on it immediately. If someone says something that hurts, we must defend. If something frustrates us, we must express that frustration. If we feel disrespected, we must correct it right away. But what if that urgency is part of the problem? What if the need to act immediately is precisely what keeps us trapped in cycles we claim we want to escape? The truth is that most of what we call reaction is not even ours. It is inherited. It is learned. It is a residue of past wounds that have not yet healed. And until we become aware of this, until we develop the skill to pause and see what is actually happening inside us, we will continue to be moved by forces we do not understand. We will continue to hand over our power to circumstances, to other people, to the randomness of life. So let us begin with the first practice, the one that makes everything else possible. It is the practice of pausing. Not in a mechanical way, not as a rule imposed from the outside, but as a deep recognition that you have the capacity to create space between stimulus and response. This pause is not about hesitation. It is not about freezing or becoming passive. It is about reclaiming the moment. It is about stepping out of the automatic stream of cause and effect and entering into conscious presence. When something triggers you, your nervous system responds before your thinking mind even catches up. This is biology. This is the survival mechanism that has kept humans alive for millennia. When a threat is perceived, your body prepares to fight, flee, or freeze. Hormones flood your system. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense. Your focus narrows. All of this happens in milliseconds, and it happens without your permission. This is not something you can stop. But here is what you can do. You can notice it. You can become aware of the activation. And in that awareness, you create the pause. The pause is not a void. It is not empty. It is full. It is full of your presence. It is full of your ability to witness what is happening without being swept away by it. In that pause, you are not numb. You are alive. You are awake. You are sensing the tension in your chest, the heat in your face, the tightness in your jaw. You are noticing the thoughts that arise, the narratives that begin to form. And you are doing all of this without acting on any of it yet. You are simply here, observing, holding space for whatever is moving through you. This is not suppression. Suppression says, I should not feel this. The pause says, I feel this, and I am not defined by it. Suppression pushes the feeling down, where it festers and grows stronger. The pause allows the feeling to be seen, and in being seen, it begins to lose its grip. When you suppress, you are still controlled by the emotion. You are just controlling it in a different way. But when you pause, you are no longer in the grip of the emotion. You are with it, but not of it. Most people resist the pause because they are afraid of what they will find if they stop moving. They are afraid that if they do not react immediately, they will lose their power. They are afraid that silence will be mistaken for weakness. They are afraid that if they do not defend themselves right away, they will be harmed. But these fears are based on a misunderstanding of where power actually lives. Power does not live in your reaction. Power lives in your ability to choose your response. And choice requires space. It requires the pause. So when you feel that surge, that flash of heat, that tightness in your chest, do not move yet. Do not speak yet. Do not act yet. Just breathe. Just notice. Just be with what is. This is the first and most essential practice. Everything else builds on this foundation. Without the pause, there is no opportunity for awareness. Without awareness, there is no possibility of change. Now, as you pause, you begin to notice something else. You begin to notice the body. The body holds everything. Every memory, every unprocessed emotion, every unresolved conflict lives in the tissue, in the muscles, in the nervous system. When you are triggered, the body knows before the mind knows. And if you learn to listen to the body, it will tell you what is really happening. This is where the second practice comes in. It is the practice of returning to bodily sensation. Not thinking about the body, but actually feeling it. Most of us live in our heads. We live in narratives, in interpretations, in stories about what is happening. And while the mind is busy spinning its tales, the body is carrying the truth. The body does not lie. The body does not rationalize. The body simply is. When you are triggered, your first instinct might be to figure out why. You want to understand. You want to make sense of it. You want to trace the feeling back to its source. And while that work has its place, it is not the work of the moment. In the moment, you do not need to understand. You need to ground. You need to come back to yourself. And the fastest way to come back to yourself is through the body. So instead of thinking, feel. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Feel the air moving in and out of your lungs. Feel the temperature of your skin. Feel the texture of your clothing against your body. These are simple things, but they are profoundly anchoring. When you bring your attention to these sensations, you interrupt the mental loop. You step out of the story and into the present moment. And in the present moment, there is no threat. There is only what is. This practice is not about escaping what you feel. It is about feeling it more fully. When you are lost in thought, you are only experiencing a fraction of the emotion. You are experiencing the story about the emotion, the interpretation of it, the meaning you have assigned to it. But when you drop into the body, you experience the raw sensation itself. And raw sensation, without the story, is surprisingly manageable. It is just energy. It is just a wave moving through you. It has a beginning, a peak, and an end. And if you can stay with it, if you can let it move without resisting it or amplifying it with thought, it will pass. This is one of the most liberating discoveries you can make. Emotions are not permanent. They are temporary. They are weather patterns moving through the landscape of your consciousness. And when you stop trying to control the weather, when you stop trying to push it away or hold on to it, you realize that you are not the weather. You are the sky. You are the space in which the weather occurs. And the sky is never threatened by the clouds. But here is where most people get stuck. They believe that if they feel something, they must act on it. If they feel anger, they must express it. If they feel hurt, they must defend themselves. If they feel fear, they must escape. This belief is so deeply ingrained that it feels like truth. But it is not truth. It is conditioning. And it can be unlearned. The third practice is the practice of separating sensation from action. Just because you feel something does not mean you must do something. This is a radical idea for many people. We have been taught that our feelings are valid, and they are. But validity does not equal necessity. You can validate your anger and still choose not to lash out. You can honor your hurt and still choose not to retreat. You can acknowledge your fear and still choose to move forward. This is not about denying what you feel. It is about recognizing that what you feel is information, not instruction. Your emotions are signals. They are messengers. They are pointing you towards something that needs attention. But they are not telling you what to do. That decision is yours. And when you understand this, you reclaim an enormous amount of power. Let us say someone says something that triggers you. Maybe it is a criticism. Maybe it is a judgment. Maybe it is something that touches on an old wound. Your immediate response might be to defend yourself, to explain, to counter, to prove them wrong. This is the reactive path. It is fast. It is automatic. It feels necessary. But if you pause, if you drop into your body, if you separate sensation from action, you create a different possibility. You notice the heat rising in your chest. You notice the tightness in your throat. You notice the thoughts racing through your mind, already forming arguments, already building your case. And instead of following those thoughts, you just breathe. You feel the sensations. You let them be. And as you do, something shifts. The urgency fades. The need to defend softens. And from that softer place, you can choose. Maybe you still respond. Maybe you do address what was said. But now you are responding from a place of clarity, not from a place of reaction. And that makes all the difference. This is the shift from external control to internal control. When you are reactive, the external world is in charge. Whatever happens out there determines what happens in here. If someone is kind, you feel good. If someone is harsh, you feel bad. If things go your way, you are calm. If they do not, you are agitated. This is exhausting. This is a life spent at the mercy of circumstances. But when you develop the ability to pause, to ground, to separate sensation from action, you are no longer at the mercy of anything. You are the author of your inner state. You are the one who decides how you respond. And that is true power. Now, this does not mean you become indifferent. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become detached from life. In fact, the opposite happens. When you are no longer reactive, you become more present. When you are not lost in your own internal storm, you can actually see the other person. You can listen. You can respond with intention. You can engage from a place of strength rather than from a place of defense. This is the paradox. The less reactive you are, the more effective you become. The more space you create inside yourself, the more capacity you have to meet life as it is. And life, as it is not a threat. Life is just life. It is a series of moments, each one presenting itself to you. And in each moment, you have a choice. You can be moved by it, or you can move with it. You can be a victim of circumstance, or you can be a conscious participant in your own experience. But let us go deeper into what actually happens in the moment of triggering. Let us look at the mechanics of it. Because if you understand the process, you can intervene at any point along the way. And the earlier you intervene, the easier it becomes. The trigger begins with a stimulus. Something happens. Someone says something. Something does not go as planned. You receive a message. You remember something. Whatever it is external to you. It is out there in the world. This is important to recognize. The trigger starts outside of you. It is not you. It is not in you. It is something that happens. Then, almost instantaneously, your system interprets the stimulus. This interpretation is shaped by your past. It is shaped by your beliefs, your experiences, your wounds, your conditioning. If you have been criticized harshly in the past, even mild feedback might be interpreted as an attack. If you have been abandoned, even a slight distance from someone might feel like rejection. This interpretation happens so fast that it feels like reality. It feels like truth. But it is not. It is a filter. It is a lens. And the lens can be changed. Once the interpretation is made, the body responds. The nervous system activates. Stress hormones are released. Your physiology shifts. And this is where most people lose themselves. They feel the sensations in the body, and they believe those sensations are evidence that something terrible is happening. They believe the racing heart means danger. They believe the tight chest means they are under attack. They believe the heat in their face means they must act. But these sensations are not evidence of external reality. They are evidence of internal interpretation. And if the interpretation is flawed, the sensations are misleading. This is why the pause is so critical. When you pause, you give yourself the chance to question the interpretation. You give yourself the chance to ask, is this actually happening, or is this my past speaking? You give yourself the chance to see the difference between what is and what you are making it mean. And that distinction is everything. So as you practice pausing, as you practice grounding in the body, you also begin to practice inquiry. Not in a harsh way, not in a self-critical way, but in a curious way. You begin to ask yourself, what am I actually reacting to? Not what the other person did, but what meaning am I assigning to what they did? Not what happened, but what story am I telling about what happened? This inquiry is gentle. It is not about proving yourself wrong or invalidating your feelings. It is about getting curious. It is about peeling back the layers. And as you do, you often discover that what triggered you in the present is not really about the present at all. It is about something old. It is about something unfinished. And when you see that, when you really see it, the trigger loses some of its power. Because now you know. Now you are no longer confused. Now you can address the real issue instead of acting out the old pattern. This is the movement from reactivity to response. Reactivity is unconscious. It is automatic. It is driven by the past. Response is conscious. It is chosen. It is rooted in the present. And the bridge between the two is awareness. Awareness of the pause. Awareness of the body. Awareness of the interpretation. Awareness of the choice. Let me give you an example. Imagine you are in a conversation with someone and they interrupt you. You feel a flash of irritation. Your jaw clenches. Your thoughts immediately go to, they do not respect me. They think what they have to say is more important. And from that place, you might snap at them. You might withdraw. You might carry that irritation for the rest of the day. This is reactivity. But what if, in that moment, you pause? You feel the clench in your jaw. You notice the thought forming. And instead of acting on it, you just breathe. You stay present. You ask yourself, what am I reacting to? And maybe you realize that being interrupted touches on something deeper. Maybe it reminds you of a time when you were not heard, when your voice did not matter. Maybe it connects to a belief that you have to fight to be seen. And when you see that, the irritation softens. Because now it is not about the interruption. It is about the old wound. And the other person is not the enemy. They are just someone who interrupted you. It happens. It is not personal. From this place, you can respond. Maybe you gently say, "Can I finish my thought?" Maybe you just let it go because it is not worth the energy. Maybe you have a conversation later about communication. But whatever you do, it comes from clarity. It comes from choice. And that feels entirely different than reacting. This is the practice. This is the work. And it is not something you master once and then it is done. It is something you return to again and again. Because life will keep presenting you with triggers. That is guaranteed. But each time you practice, each time you pause, each time you ground, each time you choose, you strengthen the capacity. You build the muscle. And over time, what used to knock you off center barely registers. Not because you have become numb, but because you have become spacious. You have become strong from the inside. And this strength is quiet. It is not loud. It is not forceful. It is not something you have to prove. It is just there. It is the calm you carry with you. It is the knowing that no matter what happens out there, you are okay in here. It is the trust that you can handle whatever arises. Not by controlling the external world, but by staying anchored in your internal world. This is what it means to not be triggered. It does not mean nothing affects you. It means you are not controlled by what affects you. It means you can feel the full spectrum of human emotion and still remain present. It means you can be vulnerable and still be strong. It means you can be open and still be protected. Not by walls, but by awareness. Not by defense, but by presence. And the beautiful thing is, as you develop this capacity, it changes how you move through the world. You stop seeing people as threats. You stop seeing situations as problems. You start seeing everything as information. Everything is feedback. Everything as an opportunity to practice. And from that perspective, there are no enemies. There are only moments. And in each moment, you have the power to choose who you want to be. This is not about perfection. You will still get triggered. You will still react. There will be days when you forget everything you know and you fall back into old patterns. That is part of being human. But the difference is, you will notice. You will catch yourself. Maybe not in the moment, but afterwards. And that noticing is progress. That is the seed of change. Because once you see the pattern, you can no longer unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, it begins to shift. So be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. This work is deep. It is challenging. It requires you to go against years of conditioning. It requires you to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. It requires you to question beliefs you have held your entire life. But it is worth it. Because on the other side of reactivity is freedom. On the other side of being controlled by your triggers is a life where you are the one in charge. Not in a dominating way, but in a sovereign way. You become the authority of your own experience. And that is a power no one can take from you. As we close this exploration, I want you to remember one thing. The situation does not control you. The person does not control you. The past does not control you. What controls you is your relationship to all of it. And that relationship can change. It changes in the pause. It changes in the breath. It changes in the willingness to feel what is here without being overtaken by it. It changes in the recognition that you are not your reactions. You are the awareness that notices them. You are the space in which they arise. And that space is infinite. That space is unshakable. That space is you. Now, let us take this deeper. Let us look at what happens when you begin to live from this place consistently. Because the practices we have explored are not meant to be techniques you apply only in moments of crisis. They are meant to become a way of being. They are meant to reshape how you relate to yourself, to others, and to life itself. When you first begin this work, the pause feels effortful. It feels like you are going against the current. Your body wants to react. Your mind wants to jump in. Your old patterns want to take over. And it takes everything you have just to create that small gap between stimulus and response. This is normal. This is the beginning. Every new capacity feels awkward at first. Every new skill requires conscious effort before it becomes natural. But as you practice, something begins to shift. The pause becomes less of an effort and more of a default. You start to notice triggers earlier. You catch them before they fully activate. You feel the first whisper of reactivity and you are already breathing, already grounding, already present. And over time, the gap between what happens and how you respond grows wider. Not because you are slowing down, but because you are waking up. You are becoming more aware. You are seeing more clearly. And in that clarity, you begin to notice patterns you never saw before. You begin to see that certain situations trigger you in predictable ways. You begin to see that certain people press the same buttons again and again. You begin to see that your reactions are not random. They are patterned. They are habitual. And once you see the pattern, you have a choice. You can keep running the pattern, or you can choose something different. This is where the real transformation happens. Because up until now, you have been unconscious. You have been on autopilot. You have been living out scripts that were written long ago, by people and circumstances that are no longer here. But now you are awake. Now you are seeing the script. And when you see the script, you are no longer bound by it. You can improvise. You can create something new. You can write a different ending. Let me be clear about something. This does not mean you will never feel triggered again. That is not the goal. The goal is not to become invulnerable. The goal is not to transcend your humanity. You are a human being. You have a nervous system. You have a history. You have wounds that are still tender. And all of that is okay. The goal is not to erase those things. The goal is to be with those things in a different way. When you are triggered, it is actually an opportunity. It is a signal that something inside you needs attention. It is a doorway into deeper self-understanding. And when you learn to meet triggers with curiosity instead of resistance, when you learn to turn toward them instead of away from them, they become teachers. They show you where you are still holding on. They show you where you are still defending. They show you where you are still afraid. And in showing you these things, they give you the chance to heal. This is a radically different approach than most people take. Most people try to avoid triggers. They try to create a life where nothing bothers them. They try to control their environment so that they never have to feel uncomfortable. But this is a losing game. Because life is uncontrollable. People are unpredictable. Circumstances change. And if your peace depends on everything going the way you want it to go, you will never be at peace. But when you develop the capacity to be with whatever arises, when you develop the strength to stay present even when things are difficult, you become free. Not free from discomfort, but free within it. Not free from challenges, but free in how you meet them. And that freedom is not fragile. It is not dependent on external conditions. It is rooted in you. It is who you are. Now, as you continue to practice, you will notice something else. You will notice that your relationships begin to change. Because when you are no longer reactive, you no longer engage in the same old dances. You no longer escalate conflicts. You no longer take everything personally. You no longer need to prove yourself or defend yourself or protect yourself in the same way. And this changes the dynamic. People who are used to getting a reaction from you will not know what to do when they no longer get one. They might push harder. They might test you. They might accuse you of not caring or being cold or shutting down. And this is where your practice deepens. Because it is easy to stay grounded when things are calm. It is much harder to stay grounded when someone is actively trying to pull you out of your center. But this is exactly the moment that matters most. When someone is trying to trigger you, they are operating from their own reactivity. They are caught in their own patterns. They are projecting their own unresolved material onto you. And if you react, you join them in that space. You become part of the pattern. But if you stay present, if you stay grounded, if you respond from clarity instead of reactivity, you break the pattern. You refuse to participate in the old dance. And sometimes, just sometimes, that creates space for something new to emerge. This does not mean you become passive. It does not mean you let people walk all over you. It does not mean you tolerate mistreatment. Boundaries are still important. Self-respect is still important. But the way you establish boundaries changes. Instead of reacting from hurt or anger, you respond from clarity. You say what needs to be said without the charge. You hold your ground without being defensive. You protect yourself without attacking. And that is a completely different energy. When you react, there is always a part of you that is trying to change the other person. You are trying to make them see. You are trying to make them understand. You are trying to make them stop. And this is exhausting. Because you cannot control other people. You can only control yourself. But when you respond from presence, you are not trying to change anyone. You are simply being who you are. You are simply stating what is true for you. You are simply holding your own space. And paradoxically, that is often more effective. Because people feel the difference. They feel the lack of manipulation. They feel the authenticity. And even if they do not change, you have not lost yourself in the process. This is the shift from external control to internal sovereignty. You stop trying to manage the world and start managing your own state. You stop trying to fix other people and start taking responsibility for your own experience. You stop waiting for circumstances to change and start changing how you meet circumstances. And this shift, subtle as it sounds, is revolutionary. Let us talk about what this looks like in everyday life. Because the real test of these practices is not in the big dramatic moments. It is in the small, mundane frustrations. It is in the traffic jam. It is in the long line at the store. It is in the person who does not respond to your message. It is in the plan that falls through. It is in the comment that rubs you the wrong way. These are the moments where you either stay present or you slip back into reactivity. And these are the moments where the practice matters most. Every time you feel that little twinge of irritation, that little flash of frustration, that little surge of impatience, you have a choice. You can indulge it. You can feed it with your thoughts. You can let it grow into something bigger. Or you can notice it. You can feel it. You can breathe with it. And you can let it pass. And every time you choose the latter, you strengthen the capacity. You train your nervous system. You rewire your brain. You build the foundation for a different way of being. This is not about becoming perfect. It is not about never feeling irritated or frustrated or impatient. It is about changing your relationship to those feelings. It is about no longer being ruled by them. It is about recognizing that you can feel all of it and still be okay. You can feel all of it and still be present. You can feel all of it and still choose how you want to respond. And here is what happens over time. The things that used to bother you stop bothering you as much. Not because you have suppressed them, but because you have seen through them. You have seen that they are not threats. You have seen that they are just moments. You have seen that your peace does not depend on them going a certain way. And when you realize that, you relax. You soften. You open. And life becomes lighter. This does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become apathetic. It does not mean you stop engaging with the world. It means you engage from a different place. You engage from curiosity rather than judgment. You engage from compassion rather than criticism. You engage from a desire to understand rather than a need to be right. And that changes everything. One of the most profound shifts that happens through this practice is that you begin to see other people differently. When you are reactive, you see people as obstacles. You see them as threats. You see them as problems to be solved or managed or avoided. But when you are present, you see them as human beings. You see that they are doing the best they can with what they have. You see that they are also carrying wounds. You see that they are also operating from conditioning. And that seeing softens you. It opens your heart. It allows for compassion. This does not mean you excuse harmful behavior. It does not mean you tolerate mistreatment. But it means you understand that people are not their worst moments. They are not their reactivity. Just as you are not your reactivity. And when you can hold that perspective, even in difficult moments, you become a healing presence. You become someone who does not add to the chaos. You become someone who brings calm. Not because you are trying to, but because that is who you are. As you walk this path, you will also begin to notice the subtle ways you have been living in resistance. Resistance to what is. Resistance to how things are. Resistance to people being who they are. And you will see how much energy that resistance takes. You will see how exhausting it is to constantly fight against reality. And you will begin to experiment with acceptance. Not acceptance as resignation, but acceptance as a willingness to be with what is. This is a delicate balance. Because acceptance does not mean you do not work for change. It does not mean you do not have preferences. It does not mean you become passive. It means you stop arguing with reality. It means you stop wasting energy wishing things were different than they are. It means you start from where you are, not from where you think you should be. And from that place of acceptance, you can take action. But the action comes from clarity, not from resistance. And that makes it more effective. When you act from resistance, there is a quality of force. There is a quality of pushing against. There is a quality of struggle. And that struggle is felt by everyone involved. But when you act from acceptance, there is a quality of flow. There is a quality of alignment. There is a quality of ease. And that ease is also felt. It creates less friction. It invites cooperation. It opens doors that resistance keeps closed. So as you continue to practice, pay attention to where you are still resisting. Pay attention to where you are still fighting. Pay attention to where you are still holding on to the way you think things should be. And experiment with letting go. Not in a way that abandons your values or your vision, but in a way that releases the struggle. In a way that trusts the process. In a way that allows things to unfold without forcing them. This is the final layer of this work. It is the movement from doing to being. Because all of the practices we have explored, the pause, the grounding, the inquiry, the response, are ultimately pointing you back to yourself. They are pointing you back to the part of you that is already whole. The part of you that is already at peace. The part of you that does not need to prove anything or defend anything or fix anything. The part of you that simply is. And when you touch that part of yourself, even for a moment, everything changes. Because you realize that you have been looking for something outside of yourself that was inside of you all along. You have been searching for peace in circumstances when peace is your nature. You have been trying to earn worthiness when worthiness is inherent. You have been seeking control over the external world when the only control you ever needed was the ability to remain anchored in yourself. This is not a destination. It is not a place you arrive at and then you are done. It is a practice. It is a way of being. It is a daily, moment-to-moment choice to return to presence. To return to the body. To return to the breath. To return to the awareness that you are not the storm. You are the sky. And no matter how intense the storm becomes, the sky remains untouched. So wherever you are on this journey, know that you are exactly where you need to be. Every moment of reactivity is an opportunity to practice. Every trigger is a teacher. Every challenge is an invitation to deepen. And every time you choose presence over reactivity, every time you choose response over reaction, every time you choose to stay with yourself instead of abandoning yourself, you are building something powerful. You are building an unshakable foundation. You are building true strength. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. Chapter 5. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It does not need to be seen or validated or acknowledged by anyone. It simply is. This strength is not about dominating circumstances or forcing outcomes or proving that you can withstand anything. It is quieter than that. It is deeper than that. It is the strength of remaining yourself when everything around you is changing. It is the strength of staying steady when the ground beneath you is shifting. It is the strength of holding your center when the world is pulling you in 1,000 directions. This is what we mean when we talk about unshakable inner balance. Not that you are never affected. Not that you are never challenged. Not that life does not touch you. But that underneath all of the movement, underneath all of the chaos, underneath all of the uncertainty, there is something in you that remains constant. There is something in you that does not waver. There is something in you that knows who you are, regardless of what is happening. Most people build their sense of stability on external things. They feel stable when their job is secure. They feel stable when their relationships are good. They feel stable when their health is strong. They feel stable when their finances are in order. And there is nothing wrong with wanting these things. There is nothing wrong with creating a life that feels solid and dependable. But the problem is that external things are inherently unstable. They change. They shift. They disappear. And if your stability depends entirely on them, then you are always one change away from collapse. This is not a criticism. This is simply how most people have been taught to live. We are told that security comes from the outside. We are told that if we work hard enough, if we plan well enough, if we control enough variables, we can create a life that is safe and predictable. And for a while, this might even work. But then something happens. The job ends. The relationship changes. The health falters. The plans fall apart. And suddenly, the foundation you thought was solid reveals itself to be fragile. And in that moment, you are faced with a choice. You can try to rebuild the external structure as quickly as possible, hoping that if you can just get things back to the way they were, you will feel stable again. Or you can turn inward. You can begin to build a different kind of foundation. One that is not dependent on circumstances. One that is rooted in something deeper. This is the work of building unshakable inner balance. It is the work of cultivating a stability that lives inside of you, not outside of you. It is the work of developing a core that remains steady even when everything around you is in motion. And this work is not easy. It goes against everything you have been conditioned to believe. It requires you to let go of the illusion that you can control life. It requires you to accept that uncertainty is not the exception, it is the rule. It requires you to trust something that you cannot see or measure or prove. It requires you to trust yourself. Let us start by looking at what happens when life gets difficult. Because difficulty is inevitable. No matter how well you plan, no matter how carefully you live, there will be times when things do not go the way you want them to go. There will be times when you are faced with loss, with disappointment, with pain, with fear. There will be times when the ground you are standing on cracks open and you find yourself falling. And in those moments, your instinct will be to grab onto something. To find something solid. To find something that will stop the fall. And what most people grab onto is the same thing they have always grabbed onto. They grab onto control. They try to fix the situation. They try to make it better. They try to force a solution. Or they grab onto distraction. They busy themselves with other things. They numb themselves with habits that keep them from feeling what is here. Or they grab onto other people. They seek reassurance. They seek comfort. They seek someone to tell them that everything is going to be okay. And again, none of this is wrong. These are natural human responses to difficulty. But they are also temporary. They are band-aids. They might help you get through the moment, but they do not build the capacity to remain steady in the face of whatever comes next. Unshakable inner balance is not built by avoiding difficulty. It is built by moving through it. It is built by learning to be with the discomfort without collapsing. It is built by discovering that you can feel everything and still remain intact. This is the paradox. The more you try to avoid discomfort, the more fragile you become. The more you try to control everything, the more powerless you feel. But when you stop running, when you stop resisting, when you turn toward what is difficult and allow yourself to fully experience it, you discover something remarkable. You discover that you are stronger than you thought. You discover that you can hold more than you imagined. You discover that the discomfort does not destroy you. It moves through you. And when it moves through you, it leaves something behind. It leaves resilience. It leaves wisdom. It leaves a deeper knowing of who you are. But let us be very clear about what this means. Turning toward difficulty does not mean seeking it out. It does not mean making your life harder than it needs to be. It does not mean wearing suffering as a badge of honor. It simply means that when difficulty arises, as it will, you do not run from it. You do not deny it. You do not pretend it is not happening. You meet it. You feel it. you allow it to be what it is. And you remain present with yourself through all of it. This presence is the key. Because when you are present, you are not lost in the story of what is happening. You are not projecting into the future, imagining all the ways this could get worse. You are not ruminating on the past, replaying what you could have done differently. You are here. You are now. You are feeling what is actually here to be felt, not what your mind is telling you about it. And in that direct experience, there is a simplicity. There is a clarity. There is a groundedness that cannot be shaken by thoughts or fears or what-ifs. This is what it means to stay the same when life gets difficult. It does not mean you do not feel. It does not mean you are not affected. It means you do not abandon yourself. It means you do not lose your center. It means that no matter what is happening on the surface, there is a part of you that remains untouched. There is a part of you that is still here, still aware, still breathing, still present. And that part of you is not fragile. That part of you is not dependent on circumstances. That part of you simply is. Now, let us talk about what it takes to access that part of yourself, especially in the moments when it feels most distant. Because there will be times when the difficulty is so great, the pain is so intense, the fear is so overwhelming, that it feels impossible to stay present. It feels impossible to remain steady. It feels like you are being pulled under by a force stronger than you. And in those moments, you need tools. You need practices. You need something to anchor you. Not something external, but something you can return to again and again, no matter where you are or what is happening. The first anchor is always the breath. This might sound too simple. It might sound like something you have heard 1,000 times. But the breath is not just a technique. It is a bridge. It is a bridge between the body and the mind. It is a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. It is a bridge between the past and the present. When you are lost in the storm of your thoughts, when you are drowning in emotion, when you cannot find solid ground, the breath brings you back. It brings you back to the body. It brings you back to the present moment. It brings you back to yourself. But breathing with awareness is different than just breathing. You are already breathing. You have been breathing your entire life. But most of the time, you are not aware of it. It is happening in the background, automatic and unconscious. And that is fine for everyday life. But when you are in difficulty, when you are struggling, when you need to find your center, you must bring the breath into consciousness. You must feel it. You must follow it. You must let it guide you back home. So when you notice that you are spiraling, when you notice that you are losing yourself, stop. Just for a moment, stop. Do not try to fix anything. Do not try to figure anything out. Just place your attention on your breath. Feel the air moving in through your nose. Feel it filling your lungs. Feel the slight pause at the top of the inhale. Feel the air moving back out. Feel the body softening with each exhale. And stay with this. Do not rush it. Do not judge it. Just breathe. Just be with the breath. And as you do, you will notice something. The intensity begins to soften. The grip begins to loosen. The thoughts begin to slow. Not because you are suppressing anything, but because you are grounding yourself. You are coming back to the one thing that is always here. The one thing that is always true. You are breathing. You are alive. You are here. This is not about fixing the problem. This is about stabilizing yourself so that you can meet the problem from a place of clarity rather than from a place of panic. Because when you are in panic, you cannot see clearly. You cannot think clearly. You cannot act wisely. But when you are grounded, even in the midst of difficulty, you have access to your intelligence. You have access to your intuition. You have access to the part of you that knows what to do. And that changes everything. The second anchor is the body. We have talked about this before, but it bears repeating. The body does not lie. The body does not get lost in stories. The body is always in the present moment. And when you bring your attention to the body, you bring yourself to the present moment. You feel your feet on the ground. You feel the weight of your body. You feel the temperature of your skin. You feel the sensations moving through you. And in doing so, you interrupt the mental loop. You step out of the narrative and into direct experience. And direct experience is always more manageable than the story you are telling about it. When life is difficult, the tendency is to live entirely in your head. You think about what happened. You think about what might happen. You think about what it all means. You think about what you should do. You think about what you should have done. And the more you think, the more tangled you become. The more you think, the more lost you become. But when you drop into the body, you drop out of the tangle. You come back to something simple. Something real. Something solid. And from that place, you can begin to move forward. Not from fear, not from confusion, but from presence. The third anchor is acceptance. And this is perhaps the most challenging one. Because acceptance does not feel like strength. Acceptance feels like giving up. Acceptance feels like defeat. But this is a misunderstanding. Acceptance is not about liking what is happening. It is not about agreeing with it. It is not about stopping your efforts to change it. Acceptance is simply about acknowledging what is real. It is about stopping the fight against reality. It is about saying, this is what is happening right now. Not forever. Not as a final verdict. Just right now. When you resist what is, you split yourself. Part of you is dealing with the actual situation, and part of you is fighting against the fact that the situation exists at all. And that fight takes enormous energy. It drains you. It exhausts you. It keeps you stuck. But when you accept what is, you reclaim that energy. You stop wasting it on resistance. You stop wasting it on wishing things were different. And you direct it toward what is actually possible. You direct it toward what you can actually do, right here, right now. This is not passive. This is not resignation. This is clarity. This is power. Because when you accept what is, you see it clearly. You see it as it actually is, not as you wish it were or fear it might become. And from that clear seeing, you can respond. You can act. You can make choices. But those choices come from a place of groundedness, not from a place of desperation. And that makes them wiser. That makes them more effective. That makes them more aligned with who you actually are. So when life gets difficult, practice acceptance. Not as a final destination, but as a starting point. Start by accepting that this is hard. Start by accepting that you do not have all the answers. Start by accepting that you are feeling what you are feeling. Do not judge it. Do not shame it. Do not try to talk yourself out of it. Just let it be. Let it be real. Let it be here. And from that place of letting it be, you create space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to choose. And in that space, you begin to find your footing again. Now let us talk about emotional independence. Because this is where unshakable inner balance truly lives. Emotional independence does not mean you do not care about others. It does not mean you are cold or detached or indifferent. It means that your emotional state is not entirely dependent on external circumstances or other people's behavior. It means that you have an internal source of stability that does not require constant validation or reassurance from the outside world. Most people are emotionally dependent without realizing it. Their mood is determined by how their day is going. Their sense of worth is determined by how others treat them. Their peace is determined by whether things are going according to plan. And because of this dependence, they are constantly at the mercy of forces they cannot control. They are constantly riding the waves of circumstance. Up when things are good. down when things are bad. And this is exhausting. This is no way to live. Emotional independence is built slowly. It is built through the recognition that your emotional state is your responsibility. Not in a harsh, self-blaming way, but in an empowering way. You are the one who decides how you relate to what you feel. You are the one who decides whether you let a difficult moment define your entire day. You are the one who decides whether someone else's opinion becomes your truth. No one can do this work for you. No one can give you this stability. You must cultivate it yourself. And you cultivate it by practicing over and over again the art of coming back to yourself. Every time something happens that would normally throw you off balance, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to notice the pull. To feel the urge to collapse into reactivity. To feel the urge to seek something outside yourself to make you feel better. And instead of following that urge, you pause. You breathe. You ground. You return to yourself. And you ask, what do I need right now? Not what does the situation need. Not what does the other person need.